On the 28th floor of a residential skyscraper in downtown Chicago, the evening sun reflected in the panoramic windows of the penthouse, flooding the room with soft light. Noah Carter sat on the leather sofa, clutching a glass of whiskey in his hands, but even the tart taste of expensive alcohol didn't help dull the inner emptiness. Downstairs, life was bustling: cars, sirens, food smells from food trucks, honking horns, music. He looked at this chaos as a foreign world from which he was separated not only by height, but by tons of glass, concrete, and expectations. His father, Gregory Carter, had died 6 months ago, and now his mother, a cold, determined Linda, insisted Noah take his place. Chairman of the board of Carter International, a hotel empire spanning dozens of countries. "This is your destiny," she said. "You're Carter. We don't make the food, we own the buildings where others do." Noah nodded silently in meetings, signed papers, discussed reports. Everything looked like success, but inside he felt disgusted, at the meetings, at the smiles of top managers, at the empty talk of profits. He didn't feel like an heir, more like a prisoner in a golden cage. As a teenager, he had secretly watched cooking shows and spent hours in the kitchen while his parents were away on business trips. His father would laugh when he found his son cutting up fish. "If you're sick of being Carter, you can go into dishwashing." Since then he had hidden his passion as a shameful hobby, knowing that in this family, a passion for cooking was considered something unworthy. But now, after his father's death, after endless meetings, Noah felt he couldn't go on. His only close friend, Mike, a former classmate, now owner of a modest coffee shop in Lincoln Park, listened to him over a mug of beer and said, "You want to figure out who you are, disappear. Disappear from your world. Drop off the radar. Get a job where no one will know your last name. Start from scratch." The idea seemed absurd at first, but the more Noah thought about it, the more he felt there was no choice. He could no longer live someone else's life. A week later he moved in. A simple apartment on the second floor of a house in Humboldt Park, creaky floors, a kitchen that barely fit a stove. Instead of designer interiors, walls covered in old posters and curtains from a cheap supermarket. He took the $50,000 watch off his wrist, hid his last name, and became just Noah. Not Carter. Not an heir. Just a guy who wants to learn how to work in the kitchen. Through an old acquaintance, Mike got him a trial period at a small restaurant called the Green Hearth, a cozy place tucked between a drugstore and a bakery on Chicago's northwest side. The owner, Tom Delgado, was a veteran who had been through 2 wars, with a face mottled with wrinkles like a map of the front. He didn't ask too many questions, but his gaze was tenacious. "You want to work, prove it. If you fail, you're out." "I don't need a last name," he said without even asking for a resume. His first day in the kitchen greeted Noah with heavy air, the smell of garlic and fried onions, the clinking of pans and the sound of knives clattering on cutting boards. His clothes soaked up the aromas after an hour. He didn't know how to hold a knife properly, forgot where the salt was, burned his hand when he tried to help the cook with the garnish. But no one felt sorry for him. Everyone worked like clockwork. Among them was Rachel Brooks, the sous chef, a woman with a keen eye that seemed to see right through you. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back in a low ponytail and manners devoid of sentimentality. Her voice was clear, sharp, without a hint of a smile. "This isn't a cooking show, rookie. No one applauds for trying here." Noah felt his insides boil but kept silent. He hadn't come here for praise. Rachel didn't look at him as an equal, but she didn't humiliate him either. Rather, she was watching. And in those glances, through the wall of coldness, there was a strange tension. Interest? Distrust? Or a premonition that he wasn't who he said he was? Either way, something flickered between them. Not trust but a spark. Not sympathy but attention. That night, returning to the empty apartment with sore hands, smelling of garlic and roasted peppers, Noah felt alive for the first time in a long time. Dirty, tired, with no name or status, he still smiled. Because for the first time in years he wasn't playing a role. He was just being himself. Or at least just beginning to recognize who he could be. The morning began with the smell of bleach and wet rags. Noah came in first before anyone else, pulled up the blinds, wiped down the tables, soaked the knives, waxed the stove, which he would not be trusted to put pans on for a long time to come. His day passed between the garbage can, the cutting table, and the mop. He peeled bags of carrots, forged the smell of onions from under his fingernails, scrubbed refrigerators and rubbed pans to bloody blisters. Not one light word from his co-workers. Not one nod of approval. Just short, curt commands: cut thinner, wrong place. Who spilled the sauce? Tom watched from a corner, not interfering but making notes to himself. And every night when the others left, Noah stayed behind. He couldn't go home until everything in him had subsided, as if there was something in the noise of the kitchen that brought him back to life. Gradually, amidst this chaos, a bridge began to build between him and Rachel. It was fragile, built on casual remarks and brief moments when the tension subsided. They argued not fiercely but tenaciously. Noah argued that a little more nutmeg should be added to the cream sauce. Rachel silently tried it, and after a minute, without acknowledging it, still left exactly the right version. Once, when he dropped a tray with a dozen servings of slices, she didn't roll her eyes, didn't yell, just threw him a clean board and said, "From scratch. And faster." Then, unexpectedly, she added, "My mom once dropped a tray of champagne at the chief's anniversary party. She was fired on the spot. And you're still hanging in there." He froze, waiting for her to continue, but Rachel looked away as if she regretted having spoken. Later, after her shift, it was just the two of them. She was slicing lemons, he was washing dishes, and suddenly the conversation took on a life of its own. About childhood, about fathers who always demanded something. About mothers who dreamed of their own cafes but worked as maids in rooms they could never live in themselves. He listened without interrupting, memorizing every detail, the tone of her voice, the way her face changed when she said the word, "mother," the way her fingers automatically cut the zest even as her eyes filled with moisture. One evening Tom closed the register, walked over to Noah, and without looking him in the eye, threw him a look. "You're no ordinary guy. I can see that. You've got hands from the right place and a nose for flavor. But if you lie to us here, if you're not who you say you are, everything you build will burn. And it won't be me who burns you. You'll do it yourself." His voice was calm but heavy. It wasn't a threat. It was a sentence that Tom left suspended in the air, demanding no response. Noah remained silent then, only gripping the edge of his apron tighter, as if that might keep him from saying everything. A couple weeks later, a whirlwind named Mason Wright flew into the kitchen. He appeared as suddenly as an unexpected visit from the eye, loud, confident, with a perfect beard, a black t-shirt, and a white smile that he flashed like the spotlight. A YouTube celebrity, a chef with millions of views, who had lifted dozens of establishments with his participation in the show, Pot or Gold. Tom said Mason came in for an internship before opening a new project, but everyone knew he wanted to breathe new life into the green hearth, and customers were already lining up just to get a glimpse of him. "He's been flirting with Rachel nonchalantly. He said she had the most accurate taste in Chicago, called her the main reason he didn't leave right away, cooked with her on camera." Their arguments were fiery but playful. Their laughter wafted through the kitchen like the smell of spicy scones, and more Noah found himself standing on the sidelines, like a theatergoer who had no place in the play. Guests were coming for Mason's sake, his food stories were going viral on social media, and the restaurant was bringing in record revenue. And Noah stayed in the background, cleaning fish, sorting the greens, picking up fallen napkins. His sauces went on the side dishes and signed. No one asked for his ideas. It was only at night, in the silence of the kitchen as he set the water for pasta, just to try a new proportion of sauce, that he felt alive. But with each passing day, Mason's shadow loomed larger and larger over what he'd managed to build. Even Rachel's eyes were different. More attentive but also wary. As if she was trying to figure out, which one was the real one? The one playing with the camera? Or the one who stayed to scrub the floors every night? During that period the kitchen did get hotter than the stove. And Noah could feel it. It was just beginning. Friday nights at the green hearth no longer resembled past weeks. People took tables 24 hours in advance, putting on a taped show in which Mason and Rachel cooked on camera to deafening laughter and perfectly constructed dialogue. The kitchen was more like a pavilion. Lights, tripods, the smell of oil and flashes. Mason twirled a knife in the air, Rachel threw him sauce on the fly, and it all turned into content. Guests laughed, applauded, ordered dishes 2-3 at a time just to take pictures and post with a hashtag. They had energy, you can't take it away. This tandem had everything that audiences love. Passion, fire, subtext. And Noah knew he didn't fit into the story. He worked in the shadows. No lights, no camera, no likes. But with a knife, with his hands, with his head. He started trying new things on his breaks, early in the morning, late at night. Digging into flavors, looking for balance, mixing tradition with intuition. His dishes became bolder. Sweet potatoes with smoky spices and caramelized bacon. Cream of corn soup with lavender butter. Chef Tom finished his plate in silence one day and said, "This is the weekend menu." That's how Noah's dishes made it into the printed page for the first time, albeit without a signature. Somewhere between peeling zucchini and picking out new seasonings, Noah kept watching Rachel more and more. She glowered at the camera, moved with ease, but behind the smile was the same tenseness in her shoulders, the same quick glances when she thought no one was looking. Occasionally they would collide glances across the kitchen, and in those seconds there was a silence between them that had more to it than any conversation. Noah held on. He kept quiet. Because he knew, anything he said would be a lie if he didn't say the main thing. One day, as Rachel was taking an order into the lounge, a veteran walked up to the counter. A regular customer. An old man in a beige coat, with hands that looked like they were carved from oak and eyes that reflected the road. His name was Roy. He often had the same thing, tomato soup and rye bread. That night he suddenly looked at Noah intently, lips tightening. "You remind me of someone," he said softly as if to himself. "Carter? You're not one of those Carters by any chance? You have a look like little Greg Carter chick, only that one was loud and you're the quiet one." Noah looked away and remained silent, but Rachel, walking by, heard it. She didn't say anything. But her eyes narrowed. She understood something, or at least remembered. A few days later the invitation came. The town hall was hosting a charity dinner to support young chefs and social kitchens. Tom handed the paper to Rachel, then said abruptly, "Noah, you're going to help her. It's a chance. Not one extra look. Not a hint. Just a chance." Rachel didn't object. Noah felt everything inside him quiver, from the fear of failure to the desire to be near her. Preparations went on for weeks. They chose the ingredients, argued, scrapped plans, reassembled. All in a cramped kitchen with the scents of lemons, thyme, and spices. Once, when the lights went out because of a short circuit and they were left in semi-darkness, sitting on the floor with notes and cups of coffee, Rachel said quietly, "You really understand flavor. You don't just copy it. You feel." He wanted to respond. Wanted to say that she was his reference point, that he could feel not only the spices but her breath when she stood next to him. But that's not what he said. He said, "I've fallen in love with you," and fell silent. She didn't turn away. She didn't walk away. Just looked at him. For a long time. As if she were looking not at his face but deeper. And then she ran her hand gently down his cheek and leaned in. Their kiss was quiet. Not like a movie. Without the effects. But with something that nearly made Noah gasp. It wasn't triumph. It was relief. The next day was business as usual. The shift, the orders, the noise, the butter on the stove. But at the end of the day Tom walked up to Noah, threw a folder on the table and said, "Meet me tonight. You're going to have a conversation with people who can change your life. But first, you have to tell me who you are." And walked away. Noah opened the folder. The logo Carter International. A list of guests. And at the bottom Linda Carter's signature. His mother. The smoke from the kitchen still hung in the air, but now the mirror was cracking. And he knew it wasn't just a conversation ahead. It was the denouement. The rain that evening was barely noticeable, almost decorative, a light veil that dripped down the windows, diluting the street lights. The Green Hearth restaurant was full. A charity dinner prepared by Rachel and Mason had brought together not only regulars, but also those who didn't usually venture into the modest neighborhoods of Northwest Chicago. Among the guests were several well-known food critics, a couple of local officials, and one woman in a white coat who entered with impeccably straight posture, as if everything in the room belonged to her. Linda Carter, Noah's mother, appeared unannounced, accompanied by an assistant, and nodded to everyone with that understated grandeur that only women used to giving orders and seeing the world bend under their gaze have. Noah was standing at the counter, wiping drops from glass goblets, when he saw her. He froze as if his body refused to move. The last time they'd spoken was 2 months ago, when he'd said he was taking a break, but hadn't explained anything. Now she was looking at him, at his sauce-stained shirt, at his hands in stale burns, at his apron, and her eyes reflected not surprise but shock. Real heavy shock. She didn't make a scene. Only approached Tom, who was watching the hall like a commander watching a position, and asked coldly, "Is that my son?" Tom didn't answer immediately. Turned his head, squinting. "Your son came here without a name. He wasn't hiding from you. He was looking for himself." Linda pressed her lips together, eyes darting toward the kitchen. "And he found himself between the dirty pans?" she hissed. Tom shrugged. "And you, where did you lose him?" Later, when the hall was empty and the tablecloths were stained with wine and the candles were burning out, Noah found Rachel in the backyard by the food crates. She was smoking a rare thing for her. He walked out to her, the cool air hitting his face. Silently he stopped in front of her. Silently she dropped her gaze. And all the while it was bubbling inside him, everything he had to say, everything he was afraid to say. And so he began. The words came hard, confused, but he spoke. Of who he was, of what he had left not to escape but to become. About how he didn't want her to see him only as a family name. And that every touch on her hand was real. He stammered in the middle. His voice shook. Tears froze in the corners of his eyes. Rachel watched without interrupting, and there was no rage in her face, there was silence. Deep, icy silence. Then she just nodded. And walked away. Without a word. No gesture. Leaving a void in the air that Noah couldn't breathe in for a long time. 3 days passed. Rachel came to work, talked only business. Looked through. Cooked with the precision of a surgeon, but disappeared right after her shift. Tom watched without asking anything. One day she stayed late. Stayed late like she couldn't go home. Tom came over, put a cup of tea next to her, sat down. There was silence between them, but then she spoke, quietly, as if she was afraid to hear her own voice. My mother was fired from the Carter Hotel for one broken vase. She worked there for 15 years. No complaints, no vacations. Just cut out. No chance, no explanation. I thought he was the same way. Tom pulled a thick envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. Handed it to her. Look what he did. She opened it carefully. Inside were blueprints, a few pages of descriptions, and a letter written in Noah's hand. A design for a new cafe. The name, Helen's Porch, in honor of her mother. A place that would cook for those without a home. Where cooks who have lost their jobs will be able to get an internship. Where single mothers can leave their children while they work in the kitchen. Everything has been thought out. Budget, sponsors, agreements with food banks. At the bottom is a caption that says, Rachel, this is your dream. I just want to help it happen. She didn't cry. Just squatted down, holding the sheets in her hands. It was as if something inside was slowly thawing. Tom walked silently out, leaving her in the semi-darkness of the kitchen. Outside the door she could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the emergency light flickering. And in the corner, Noah's apron lay on the table. Folded neatly. Waiting like himself. For the first time, not as an heir. But as a man who had chosen to be honest. Even if it was too late. The morning was still gray when Noah heard the knock on the door. He'd been up most of the night, standing at the window, watching the deserted streets of Chicago slowly come to life, the garbage trucks, the occasional passerby, the raindrops cooling on the parapets. He knew that if she didn't come tonight, she might never come again. But she came. She stood on the doorstep in a dark blue coat, with a tired but firm look in her eyes. In her hand she held an envelope, the one with the project in it. Without a word she entered. The apartment was quiet, smelling of coffee and paper. They sat down opposite each other like two people who had been through a storm. She said she had been thinking a lot. About her mother. About herself. About him. That the pain was real but that the truth was real too. That deceit wasn't always betrayal if it was born of fear of loss, not a desire to hide. He was silent, not defensive. It was only at the end, when she put her hand on his palm, that he pulled a bunch of keys from the dresser. On one of them was a tag engraved, Helen's Porch. He looked her in the eye and said, We're opening the cafe tomorrow. That's your name on the sign. And hers too. Opening day was unexpectedly sunny, as if even the sky had decided not to get in the way. The cafe was in an old building on the corner where a workshop used to be. Now there was a bright sign, simple wooden tables, and the aromas of rosemary, fresh baked goods, and citrus. People came in families, some by chance, some on purpose. A framed black and white photograph of a smiling woman with a headscarf, Helen, Rachel's mother. Beneath the photo were the words, a place where everyone feels needed. In the middle of the hall stood Linda. No one had announced her appearance. She entered alone, without her usual entourage, in a modest coat, almost without makeup. She approached the table where Noah was already waiting. He handed her a plate, simple chicken with citrus sauce and mashed potatoes with a slight rosemary flavor. She took a fork, tasted it, and, as if something inside her cracked, she exhaled slowly and lowered her head. The tears flowed silently, silently. It wasn't just about the taste. It was about something she hadn't realized before. About the son she tried to make an heir to without seeing that he'd been human for a long time. A few weeks later, Tom gathered the entire staff of the Green Hearth in the small hall. He came out in the apron he had worn for the last 20 years and took it off, folding it neatly. Time to make room, he said, and there was weariness in his voice, but also peace. He handed the keys to Noah and Rachel. I don't think you'll just be cooks. You'll be the ones who teach others not to be afraid to be real. Everyone applauded. He bowed. Walked away. Mason didn't show up, but he sent a letter later. It was short, Rachel, you're stronger than I am. And more honest than most. I'm glad you're with him. You've created something real. Thank you for showing me that the kitchen is as much a home as a show. She read it to Helen's porch in the kitchen and stood looking out the window for a long time. Then she just smiled and went back to work. The final night came one Sunday. Inside the cafe, soft lamps burned, and it smelled of caramel, basil, and fresh bread. At a large table sat those with whom it all began. Rachel, with a serious look but relaxed shoulders. Noah, with a shirt that had sauce dripped on it again but he didn't even notice. Linda, calm, not checking her phone for the first time in a long time. Tom, in a sweater, with a mug of tea and a look like he always knew it was going to be like this. The cooks from the green hearth, laughing, arguing, alive. On the wall behind them hung the same picture of Helen. It was like she was with them. And behind the frame came a voice, quiet but confident. To find yourself, sometimes you have to get lost. To build something real, first you have to destroy what was false. And that was all there was to it. Everything worth remembering. Dear viewers, thank you for being with us. Subscribe to the channel, like us, and be sure to write in the comments what you think of this story. Don't forget to click on the bell, so you don't miss new interesting stories. See you soon.